What's up, everyone? Mr. NoobTube Gamer. Today we're playing Battlefield 1942 in 2022, the very first game in the Battlefield series. We're going to see how it holds up 20 years later. Yes, this year is the 20-year anniversary of Battlefield 1942, which means that it's also the 20-year anniversary of the entire Battlefield franchise, which has fallen on hard times in recent years. But with all the things that have recently been happening to the Battlefield series and all the controversy surrounding Battlefield 2042, I can imagine a lot of people are interested in playing the older games, and this is as old as you could get. And I know a good chunk of my viewers weren't even alive when this game came out in 2002. I was alive back then. I was born in 1998, so I was about 4 years old when this game released. Obviously, I didn't play it back then, and actually didn't play it until last year when I made my Battlefield 1942 in 2021 video. So I pretty much only have a year of experience with this game, which means that I'm going to come at this game with a new perspective, being someone that did not play the game back then, so I don't have any nostalgia bias towards 1942, which other people may have who did play it back then. Maybe it was their first FPS game that they ever played online, you know what I mean? So, people who came from it that way might just be like, oh, it's the greatest game of all time, just because they grew up with it, so they have those feelings based only on nostalgia. But the thing is, we're all guilty of that. Battlefield Bad Company 2 was my first Battlefield game, and I also think that Bad Company 2 is one of the best Battlefield games, one of the best FPS games of all time. But maybe the fact that it was my first Battlefield has something to do with that opinion, you know what I mean? So we may all have different opinions on the Battlefield series and what makes a good Battlefield game, which is heavily influenced by when we started playing Battlefield and what our first Battlefield game was. That being said, if your first Battlefield game was 2042, I'm very sorry. Your first impression of the series is very, very bad. But there are plenty of great Battlefield games over the years that are still a lot of fun in 2022. And yes, 1942 is one of those games. Even though it's very old, very outdated, from the graphics to the core gunplay and the movement and all of that, I think the gameplay footage speaks for itself in that regard. I was able to upscale it to 1440p to make it look a little bit more crisp, but there's only so much you can do with a game like that came out so long ago. But graphics are not everything. And I do think there's still a lot of fun to be had with 1942 in 2022. So long as you come into the game with certain expectations in mind. Don't expect there to be destructible environments. Don't expect to be able to customize all your attachments and your weapons like you can in the newer Battlefield games. Those features just do not exist in 1942 and the other Battlefield games that were out during that time period. I would say prior to Bad Company 1. You didn't really have any of those features that, most people would think of when they think of Battlefield. You do have large-scale warfare. That is the foundation of what makes a Battlefield game Battlefield. You have tanks, you have planes, you have these huge maps that in 2002 were very, very impressive, and I think the maps still play very well to this day. And I know a lot of people who played 1942 Portal in 2042. They played maps like Battle of the Bulge, and they just weren't impressed. They think the maps just didn't flow that well and weren't designed that good. I will tell you, they play a lot better in the original game than they do in 2042 because you don't have sprint in 1942, so the map kind of accommodates for the movement system of the old game, but the map design is exactly the same in the newer game where you do have sprint and all the other modern gaming features. That the map doesn't really translate well into a modern video game, but going back and playing the old version, playing the original version, the map actually plays really well. And overall, I would say Battlefield 1942 is a good piece of gaming history. It was really the first online game of its kind. And I'd say just based off of that historical context and, just if you're a Battlefield fan, it's definitely worth going back and playing this game in 2022, whether you're a first-time player or someone who's been playing this for 20 years. The fact that you still have a very strong online community in 2022, I think that speaks volumes to just how iconic the game was back then and how fun it still can be. Because there are not too many games that were from 2002 that you can literally get a full 64-player server. And it's a game that's actually no longer officially supported by EA. The servers were officially shut down, I think back in 2014, 2015, around that time. but the community brought it back, and they're still keeping this game alive. You know, there are certain times where you'll have a better chance of finding a server. From my experience, there's really only one server that gets fully populated, and that server is based off of Europe, I believe the UK. So if you live very, very far away from the UK, like if you're in Australia or Asia or somewhere really, really far away that you'll get like a 300 ping if you try to connect to it, then yeah, it might not be worth playing at all, depending on where you live. I just want to put that out there. I usually try to mention that every time I go back and play a game where there's only like one server in one part of the world. Yeah, I think based off of where you live, you're going to have a much different experience than me, who lives in the East Coast in the United States, so I get like a 100 ping connecting to that server, which isn't too bad. It's like, I would say like once you get like to 150, that's when an online game pretty much becomes unplayable. So I'm like kind of borderline, but I'm still able to have a good time. I would say if you live in like the West Coast of the US even, you might not be able to play the game that well, because you might be too far away to really have a decent connection. So keep all that in mind. Now, as far as how you can get the game back online in 2022, I'm going to leave a link to a video tutorial in the description that if you just watch the video, you'll be able to get online in no time. It's the exact same video that I watched for myself, so I can verify that it works. And that if you just follow all the steps in the video, you'll be good to go. But yeah, I would definitely say Battlefield 1942 is a very interesting experience 20 years after the game's original release. It may not hold up as well as games like Battlefield 3. I mean, Battlefield 3 came out 10 years ago and still feels and looks like a game that came out last month. Really, every Battlefield game that has come out since 2011 feels like a game that could have been released in 2022. Battlefield 1942 obviously is not one of those games, and I have experienced a little bit of frustration with certain game mechanics. Like, the visibility is awful. There are so many times where aiming with my sniper rifle and I accidentally just kill a teammate. Yeah, there's team killing and there's all that stuff, and it's really hard to tell whether or not a person on the field is an enemy or an ally, and there are a lot of times where I accidentally kill teammates and felt like shit about it. Because with, you know, the modern online FPS design, if you see an enemy with a red username above their head, you automatically think they're an enemy. But the way it works in 1942 is that there are certain teams, like I think the Allies are blue and the Axis are red. So you can be on the Axis team, you can be a German, and your teammates can have red usernames above them and come up red in the crosshairs, and you're like, oh, they're an enemy, but they're actually a teammate. So be careful with that, because I think if you kill too many people, you might get kicked out of the server, and if you're sniping, it's really bad because you can't even see their username. Yeah, the visibility definitely is the thing that I can think of the most that hasn't aged very well. But besides that, I think it's still a pretty solid online game to play these days, and I would recommend it. Still a pretty fun and immersive World War II shooter. Without a doubt, the best World War II shooter in the Battlefield series, if we're comparing it to the other World War II games that we've had, which is Battlefield 1943 and Battlefield 5. 1942 easily blows both of those games out of the water. So if you're into World War II and if you're into Battlefield, it's a no-brainer. Play Battlefield 1942. And if you like this video, consider subscribing to the channel. I'm going to make videos on every single Battlefield game and how they play in 2022. My next video is going to be Battlefield Vietnam, which is the second game in the Battlefield series. So I'm going to keep running the gauntlet, going all the way up until probably Battlefield 5, because I just don't fuck with 2042, and the game is still technically in development. So, you know, if I make a video on, oh, how does 2042 play in 2022 in May, the game is probably going to be very, very different by December, you know what I'm saying? So I'm not going to cover 2042, but I'm going to cover every Battlefield game until Battlefield 5. So if you're interested in that, subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video if you liked it, and let me know in the comment section if you still play Battlefield 1942 in 2022, and just your overall thoughts on the game. I'm interested in hearing all of your opinions in the comment section. But yeah, that's pretty much it. As always, thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace.